Okay, hi guys. This is Ms. Rigdon coming to you live from my kitchen. I'm going to show you what it is that you need to do today in Canvas for 1.7a, which is our topic today on Tuesday, January 19th. Okay, so I'm going to just kind of scroll through here so you can see where we're at on the calendar. Right here is today, right on the 19th. So when you click on the 19th, you're going to see that what's listed here is the note sheet that you can print. That's optional if you want to print it or not. The section of the textbook that we need to read for the warm-up. The PowerPoint itself is sitting right here. I'm going to obviously put the link to this video right here in this spot. This is my narrated video version. And then when you're all done, here's the fun sheet. The fun sheet, you have two options for turning it in. You can either print it from this PDF right here. It's just a one-page document. Fill it in just like you would in class, and then take a picture of it and submit it through Canvas right here at the Submit Assignment button. Or you have the option of doing a digital version instead. So if you don't have a printer, you can do the digital version, which is just going to be like a Canvas quiz type thing. And you'll just click here to get to it and then, submit it through Canvas like you normally would those types of assignments. Neither one of these are ready as of right this minute. That's why you see this red text here. So hopefully by the time you get to this on Tuesday, you'll see not only the link to the video here, but also this link right here will work for the assignment. Okay. So getting started today, again, our topic is 1.7a, which is searching and collecting evidence. And that PowerPoint is right here, looks like this. Okay. So the warm-up requires you reading page 42 of your textbook. So let's go back to that. I'm going to show you what it looks like. It looks like this when you open the file. And it's the beginning of chapter 2, and it's about JonBenet Ramsey and her case. So if you will take a moment and pause the video and read this section right here, then you'll be able to do the warm-up on your note sheet. If you have not printed out the note sheet, at least, maybe write down a couple of things on some notebook paper so that you can have that warm-up as well. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to read the warm-up, and we'll just go over the answers to the warm-up now. So it said, what were some things that went wrong at the JonBenet Ramsey case? Basically, they did almost everything wrong. When they originally thought that it was kidnapping, they weren't looking for a body. They were just looking for things that were out of place, and they weren't sure what it is really to look for. So they did what we would call only just a very basic search of the house, and they didn't find her body immediately. The house was not sealed off, which means that all sorts of random people came in there, friends, family. Cops walked all around, not understanding that it was a murder scene and not a kidnapping, so there's a lot of in and out. The father was able to leave for a good bit of time, totally unattended by any officers, so who knows what he was doing at that point. There was a sheet that was removed from the body when he brought her upstairs and laid her in the foyer area of the house from the basement. So that sheet was removed. That could have been all sorts of evidence on that. And then the body itself, of course, was moved. As we just said, he picked her up out of that small room in the basement and laid her on the foyer floor. So several things went wrong that should not have happened in this case. It's a very, very popular case, not only at the time, but it's still popular today. In fact, they just had a big special about the case. I think it was a Friday night. I just watched it. It was on ABC, so maybe you can find that and watch that. It was pretty interesting. It was about 2 hours long. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start on the notes. Okay, so this is the note sheet. If you've printed it out, that's where the warm-up went right there. So we're going to start right here. Again, the note sheet is optional. You don't necessarily have to have that. If you're watching this video, that's probably enough for you. I will have note sheets available for you when you come back if you do want a copy of it. If you want to have something that you can study from later, I'll have those papers available for you for those of you that do not have a printer. Okay, so before we really get started on this, I do want to point out a couple of things. I'm probably going to be going a little faster on the video than I normally do in class, and that's because you have the power to pause me. You can pause this video at any time as you're taking your notes. So just don't worry about that too much. The other thing is that when you are using this video, especially if you didn't actually have a physical note sheet, if you're using it to help you with the fun sheet, It is going to go in order of the questions on the fun sheet as well, just like it always does. So just wanted to point that out. Okay, so first part of our notes is about searching the crime scene. So the first thing that you want to take into account when you're dealing with a crime scene, once you've kind of sealed it off, like we talked about last week, is to figure out what would be the best way to search the scene to find all of the relevant evidence that could be there. So, this is another situation where you have to cross your I's and dot your T's and be very, very careful, because any evidence that's tampered with or broken or anything that's found like on a secondary search instead of a primary search, it just kind of opens the door for defense attorneys to say, something went wrong there. So you never want to get to the point where it's looking like you're covering up evidence. So again, the vast majority of police agencies do have people that are specifically trained for collecting evidence and, searching for it in a way that makes sense. So they know what they should be looking for in most cases because they have that practice. So conducting a crime scene search, the method is really going to depend on several things. The first thing is, how big is the crime scene? Is it something where you're dealing with an outside field, where you're looking for small objects that may indicate the position of a body or something like that? Or are you dealing with just sort of a small interior room? The suspect and the victim, whatever they did in the scene, whatever crime was committed, whether it's a shooting or a stabbing or a beating, those are going to leave different forms of evidence. So you'll need to kind of take that into account when you go to search for things. You also want to have somebody acting as the supervisor for everyone that's working within the scene. And you can subdivide a very, very large crime scene into segments to keep your searchers from being overwhelmed or having to spend all day searching one crime scene. No matter what, you always want to take into account entry and exit points. And there are some typical search patterns available. So first one is called parallel, and it's pretty simple why it would be called that. It would be one person or perhaps several people kind of going across the crime scene and just sort of, kind of going this way, and then they could go back and go another way a little further down. It's shown here on the PowerPoint as an interior room, but generally you would use parallel when you're searching kind of a larger area. So it might be like a field where you're looking for, let's say, a knife or a handgun or something that's in the grass. You would have several people walking forward in a line, and each person is responsible for the area at their feet. The next search pattern is called grid, and this one is basically a doubled parallel. So you can see how you would go in one direction and then the other. In smaller rooms, like the one depicted here, you can do what's called an inward spiral, where you start at the perimeter of the room, looking for evidence along the walls and in the corners, and then working your way towards the middle. And the next one is, of course, just the opposite. This is the outward spiral, where you are looking at, the middle, which may be, let's say that's where the body is, and then you are kind of working your way out. And then the last search pattern on your sheet is called zone, where you have different quadrants that are searched by either different people or the same person at different times. First I'm going to do the bed area, then I'm going to do the chair area, something like that. So what are you searching for? Well, that determines, how do you determine that? You look at what is typically found at most scenes that are similar to ones that you've seen before. So in the case of a homicide, you are going to be looking for the weapon, and you're looking for anything that indicates sort of a transfer of materials between suspect and scene and victim and suspect. And that's all about, low-charge exchange principle. Remember, we talked about that on our very first day of notes, where cross-transfer is very important in forensic evidence. You always want to look for those things that make those links. If you're dealing with a burglary case, oftentimes there's tool marks that are used to not only break into rooms and vehicles, but also to remove valuable items. So you're looking for a crowbar, marks on doors, or perhaps a screwdriver, something like that. If you are searching inside of a vehicle, you will be looking for if you're dealing with, like, say, a hit and run accident where a pedestrian was killed, you want to look underneath the car just as much as you do looking through the interior of the car and the exterior portions. Underneath is where you might find some torn bits of clothing or blood from the victim as well. You're going to be looking for things that deal with different types of crimes, looking to see, sorry about that interruption. So if we have, let's say, a kidnapping that takes place where we have a vehicle involved in the process, you're going to want to look for things that indicate that the victim was in the vehicle. So it could be blood or hairs or fibers. If you should find the victim's body, then you might be able to match up the fabric pattern of the car upholstery to indentations that are in the skin, especially if the body spent a long time, let's say, in the back seat of the car and the trunk. You would be looking for fibers and fabric indications for that as well. If you are dealing with broken windows from stolen cars, you want to look for glass and things like that. No matter where you are, whether you're in a vehicle or in a room or wherever, you're going to look for fingerprints on any surface that could hold them. So basically any smooth surface probably could have a fingerprint on it. All right, real quick, the method of conducting a crime scene search depends on the location and the size of the area and the actions of the suspects and the victims. If investigators had a large field to search, what search patterns might be the most appropriate for that situation? I would say probably either parallel or grid for a very, very large area. The spirals would be hard to maintain a specific difference as you were working inwards or outwards. And zone might work if you had a lot of personnel to do the searching. Okay. Now, if you're looking for physical evidence, remember that physical evidence can be literally any size. It could be microscopic or it could be huge. Just depends on what type of crime you're dealing with. Some evidence items are very obvious when you're dealing with, let's say, handguns or cigarette packages, or let's say you're looking for a crowbar. Blood spatter is usually pretty obvious. But other things are so much smaller that it takes a minute to kind of think about, you know, what should I look for and where? So maybe I should be looking for hairs and fibers. Those are very difficult to find sometimes. So here we see a picture of a man looking at what appears to be a t-shirt, and he's got an alternate light source. You'll notice that he is wearing some filtered goggles that kind of show him just through that particular color, which is yellow, what he can see with that alternate light source. He's probably looking for hairs and fibers, or perhaps also looking for blood stains that would fluoresce under that alternate light source. He is wearing a little hat on his head to keep his own hairs from entering this area here as he does his examination. Of course, he's got his gloves on, so that's all good. So we might be looking for tiny traces of blood, hairs and fibers, like we said. If we're dealing with things other than clothing, you can use a vacuum. So if you're looking at a rug or wall-to-wall carpeting, you look at that sort of thing. So when we're dealing with these tiny items, oftentimes they are attached to something else, and that something else that they're attached to is referred to as a carrier. A carrier oftentimes is clothing. Clothing can hold everything from hairs and fibers, which are probably the most obvious, to pieces of glass, to shards of tiny pieces of metal. Could be really anything. And no matter what it is that you eventually are going to find in the lab, that piece of clothing needs to be treated in a way that it keeps those items on it while it's being transported to the lab. So as I mentioned, if you have a rug or a carpet, you can just roll it up. This would include wall-to-wall carpet. You can just sort of cut out a section of it and roll that up and take it to the lab. If you have a car seat in a car, you can take the entire seat out. You don't necessarily have to cut into the upholstery. You can just lift the car seat up out of the car. Okay, so at this point, you may want to take a quick break and work on number 1 through 6 on the fun sheet. That's just the ones at the top of the page, and then we'll come back for the rest of the notes.